Welcome back, friends. CD Mangake here to do another take of the video that, for whatever reason, my voice sounded like it was RoboCop. Uh, Wanted to go through and talk something up new about Dragon Ball Fighters that I think that hasn't really been explicitly appreciated for quite some time by really anybody as a whole. And that is going to be the character designs in terms of like the characters' move sets and move list within Dragon Ball Fighters itself, in particular, how it sort of reflects the growth of the protagonist, Son Goku. So, this is something that I wanted to talk about for a while because I know that like a lot of the love for Dragon Ball Fighters has sort of kind of been an undercurrent as of late, but there's a lot of things to cherish about this game and this series. And everybody was like just dripping and drooling over how amazing like the game looked and how many references there were to the original manga and the anime that aired all those years ago. And hats off to Arc System Works for doing a lot on their part to recreate a lot of those moves and to take so much inspiration from that source material when designing these characters. I do want to address one misconception that a lot of the community still has about Dragon Ball Fighters to this day, and that is usually about the current involvement of the game itself. As most everybody knows, Bandai Namco contracted Arc System Works to develop Dragon Ball Fighters. Arc System Works made the game, they designed the characters, and for that first year, they did some of the balancing for the game itself. What most people don't realize is that after that first year, and starting in Season 2, where characters like Videl, Jiren, and most notably GT Goku got released, it was all Bandai Namco in charge of the balancing of the game itself. Arc System Works would continue to design all of like the DLC characters up through Season 3, ending their involvement with Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta. At about that point in time, Arc System Works, being a smaller developer, was busy working on implementing rollback across many of their games, releasing Guilty Gear Strive and developing the DLC for those characters and managing the Arc Revo Tour and things like that. So they kind of slowed down on some of the production, and that led Bandai Namco to look within themselves to try and see if they could do things with this engine themselves. They had the tools to balance the game, of course, and they understood how to tweak things within it, and they've been balancing the game ever since Season 2, and that can explain a lot about how the game has changed over the years when we see how much more like a Dragon Ball game it has become over time. And then Bandai decided to test themselves truly by designing their own character. That character, of course, being Lapco 21, a character that Arc System Works had no involvement with, and it was strictly Bandai. I will let that speak for itself. And for anyone who's like, really? Arc System Works hasn't done anything with Dragon Ball Fighters recently? Well, I have this saved on my tweet deck, which I rarely even use, but I remember this feature, where this is the last thing that Arc System Works' Twitter account has ever discussed regarding DBFZ. And that is this tweet right here from September 5th of 2020, so almost 3 years ago as the recording of this video. And they say, PSA. For questions and support issues regarding Dragon Ball Fighters, please direct any inquiries to Bandai Namco's customer support page. They basically said, leave us alone. This isn't our game. Go bug Bandai. We don't do shit with this anymore. And y'all still at them on Twitter when you see that hit A assist was not changed at all. Or you see these things. Arc System Works, this isn't their game anymore. It hasn't been their game in a long while, and they're not working on the rollback netcode. They're not designing any new characters. It's all up to Bandai Namco now. That is where we are at with Dragon Ball Fighters development, and I'm just mentioning that here because it is an important piece of real-world information to consider when I'm going to be talking about the toolkits of these characters, because Arc System Works designed the movesets overall, and then Bandai Namco has added and taken from them with the balance paint changes that they've done over the years that Dragon Ball Fighters has been out. So wanted to mention that here, shed a little bit of light on that. Now with that out of the way, let's get into the meat of the video itself, which is Goku and how he has changed as a fighter, represented by his move list and his toolkit over the years in Dragon Ball Fighters. Because there's a lot of storytelling here, a lot of visual storytelling happening with this character itself. If you guys enjoy this video, I also have some thoughts on Vegeta himself, as well as how this relates to some of like the fusion characters, and as well as some other characters, I think, for Dragon Ball. So if you'd like to see another video like this one, let me know in the comments down below. In the meantime, let me gush about one of my favorite characters, no matter how bad, quote-unquote, of a father we perceive him to be these days. So, Son Goku, the most iconic character of Dragon Ball, the main protagonist, student of Master Roshi and then King Kai, and nowadays like Whis and things like that. So, going into his move list himself, we see a lot of iconic attacks from him. He is a master of the Kamehameha, able to fire it horizontally, upwards, in the air, stationary, downward, stationary. And he's been able to, with Bandai Namco's patching, now Super Dash and combo from this move as well, sort of becoming like a full-screen threat with this technique. And I kind of find it interesting now that Bandai has added this change over the last few patches, because I feel like it's almost a reference to Master Roshi and how he flies around with the Kamehameha. You know, he would use this for mobility, and now his students who are able to fly on their own are able to sort of naturally sort of improve on this technique. Well, what if instead of using the Kamehameha to fly, we fly after the Kamehameha, right? We see a bit of this element, too, in GT Goku's design, which has some Dragon Ball influence, right, with how he uses the pogo stick. You know, he uses a different form of the Kamehameha to fly himself around, right? And already beginning to see some improvements where he's able to change his direction multiple times. And as a kid, his use of the Kamehameha is different from how he uses it as an adult, where being a kid fighting people bigger than him, usually adults, he angles his attack upwards. Then, of course, once he gets the high ground, he fires it downwards. But, you know, this is a Goku who, growing up, he fights people on his footing who have the same mobility as him, so he's a lot more direct with how he's implementing this particular technique these days. So I think that's very cool. Going into his normals, we see that there's like this little bit of like a scrappy sort of multi-person fighting style here, where this is a Goku who, around the Saiyan saga, was depicted a lot of the times fighting groups of combatants, particularly like in the movies, but also when he shows up to fight the Ginyu Force on Planet Namek, where he does this auto combo sequence against, right? So this is Goku, who is the strongest amongst his friends and usually is depicted coming in and cleaning up the mess. And, you know, he displays his strength by fighting multiple combatants at once, right? Like that's something that's a martial arts trope at times, is, you know, one master taking on like 100 random nobodies and defeating them all, kind of a thing, right? And but we see that this is a limited Goku as well. He doesn't have like a huge full-screen normals going on for him, right? These are all very conservative with their range. But he has, like, you know, tools to fight a full screen. He's able to fire Ki Blasts. This is also a Goku who is an underdog at times. He has to amplify his own abilities with the Kaioken. And so because he's fighting opponents stronger than him, he's a little crafty. You know, throwing out these from-the-ground Ki Blasts as a surprise against Frieza. And do, like, this tricky overhead sequence, right? And he uses his fast movement as well with patches from Bandai to jump on in, but, you know, it's more of like a once I get the hit kind of move rather than something that he'd actually like utilize in neutral. When we get to his other special moves, right, we see his command throw, which is kind of a scrappy command throw. You know, he sort of uses his whole body, right, to generate the force to throw you. Little bit of ki here, and he's able to extend it even further. All very cool. All very cool stuff. And of course, this is a Goku who does rely on some of the Kaioken techniques or the King Kai techniques, right? Like the Spirit Bomb, gathering other people's energy, right? He can't use his super move unless he does this, right? He collects other people's energy, or he has a DHC to set up with it. So while this Goku is like the strongest, this is still a Goku that relies on his friends at times to help him through the fight in a couple of ways. And then there's his shoulder charge moves as well, where he can kind of directly go in. It's very minimal mobility usage, but it's sort of envisioned by him as a counter attack of sorts, where he kind of fades back, right? Like he's going to start pressuring you, you know, and you're thinking about his throw, but then he fades back like, hey, don't hit me, and has a 4-frame reversal, right? So sort of like a counterpunch style here, but a lot of his attacks and techniques are very much close-range affairs as they were, kind of appropriate to the smaller scale of the battles that he fought at this point of his life. But what things sort of get interesting narratively for me is the Kaioken super moves, where it's so interesting to see what Goku does once he powers himself up. he takes his normals and he goes full screen with them. You know, this is his 2M in Kaioken. It's the same 2M he did before, but he's using the Kaioken to extend it to literal full screen lengths to it, right? Even his, like, throw technique as well. So it's very interesting to see that once Goku kind of starts tapping into, like, higher power levels, he uses it to improve his physical capabilities first and foremost. And this is very evident once we start comparing his kit as a Super Saiyan. Now, I talked about Goku kind of being like the strongest amongst his group, but a bit of an underdog at times, right? Like, Vegeta comes to Earth, and he's far stronger than Goku, and Goku has to rely on the Spirit Bomb and techniques that briefly amplify his power in order to compete. This is a Goku who is arguably the strongest being, or at least conceived to be the strongest being in, like, the known universe. Not just Earth, but, like, the entire thing. He's a legend. Now, and he's beaten Frieza, who was supposed to be like this unstoppable galactic emperor of sorts, right? And now he's Goku's the top dog, and this is very much a Goku who is sort of exploring what it means to be that pinnacle of strength in a lot of ways. Of course, there's a few techniques that he maintains, right, from his base form. So this is auto combo used to be his base 5M and his base 5H. Of course, in real-world terms, this was just Arc System Works when they were working on the designs for these characters, reusing assets to cut down and have to make whole new assets, right? Like, that's a very normal thing to have happened, so let me be clear about that. There's a very practical reason why there's a bunch of reused animations across these characters, right? But there is some subtle flourishes to these things to really differentiate them. Like, for example, this 5LLL, Goku's old 5H, you know, is very much like this huge dust cloud of an attack that comes on up. Compare that to base Goku, it's not really a shockwave to it. There's some like little energy flourishes or, you know, breaking of air or whatever around him, but it's not to the same degree as a Super Saiyan form. I mean, look how much of his body he's putting into this, you know, throwing himself to generate the force that he needs to now, and he can still rely on that tactic, of course, right? But this is a Goku who's using the Super Saiyan power to let the power of the form carry him a lot further than they did before. This is a Goku who's starting to dabble in amplifying the range of his moves. Of course, they weren't originally like this when Arc System Works designed the game, but Bandai Namco has changed these normals to behave like this with their balance patches. So this is sort of the narrative that now kind of comes up because of the changes that Bandai has made to the character, right? Which I find it a little more interesting than just like, yeah, Goku just uses the same old reliable 2M, but no, it's changed, right? Like over the years. And it gets very interesting once we look at his Super Saiyan Blue form as well. You know, he's using a new 5H here, but there's some things that he keeps as old reliable, like his, you know, 2M, or his 2H, right? His 5M is a whole new move, which is more interested in, again, covering space. This is a character who is fighting bigger scaled battles, and so it's more viable to attack from farther ranges with the increased physical ability that he has nowadays, right? Where things get a lot more interesting, though, for this form is like the special moves, although I will shout out the Ki Blast. He's not trying to be sneaky anymore. He's very direct. He's saying, get down, you bastard, right? But the special moves now. The Kamehameha does multiple hits now. It's a stronger version of the move. And this is a Goku who's a lot more comfortable with doing attacks in the air and fighting in the air as he's gotten more used to flying, where his base form is kind of stiff in terms of the combo routes he can do in the air. A lot of his stuff is a lot more closer to the ground in his combo routing, right? Whereas, you know, Super Saiyan Goku can do a lot of more things in the air, especially with all these special moves. And again, he's the strongest thing out there, so he's trying to overwhelm you with this power that he has, right? Covering huge distances, flying all the way across there, anti-airing you with this series of moves. But he's almost like too confident in this power, right? Because you got to think about it. You whiff this move, it's a free super dash punish from your opponent, right? So he's got to be kind of careful with it. Again, it's powerful, but it's almost too powerful for its own good. And with Bandai Namco's balance changes as well, how they reworked his overhead series, right? The medium version is a little slower, but it gives you plus frames, so he's able to force his turn again, just brute forcing his way in, trying to open you up and make you feel his Super Saiyan abilities. Of course, he's starting to implement instant transmission into his fighting style, since he's learned that move, right? So he's able to teleport directly to you. with these attacks. And he's kind of adding in a bit of invulnerability as well with the most recent balance patch, right? This is now a 4-frame reversal. It's a little finicky, though. You can get hit out of it as you're trying to punch the opponent, so not as functional as it should be, kind of showing that it's not intended to be that, but Bandai's trying to make it like that, and they sort of goofed on it, so who knows? Might be another buff they give him in the patch to actually make it like invulnerable until he physically hits you. Maybe that's a buff they'll give him to make it a reliable 4-frame reversal. But I digress. I digress. Right? And then, of course, you know, there's the super moves, right? This is a Goku brimming with power, and I think it's very evident once you see that he's got the double super routes, right? Which over the game's life has sort of, you know, waned and waxed between, like, being a very viable option, like in Season 1, to basically worthless, and then they buffed it to be viable again, so he can do that, right? Giving him a double super back. So, kind of, again, this is a Goku who believes himself to be the ultimate fighter. He's the strongest being out there, right? He's proven it time and time again, and he's trying to overwhelm you with these new abilities that he has. But then he meets Beerus, and he gets humbled by Beerus, and he starts training with Whis, and he discovers a whole new realm of power, godly power, God Ki, right? And this is where we see sort of like a reversion to basics for Goku Blue, as I'm going to call him, because I'm not going to say Super Saiyan God, Super Saiyan more than the one time I just did. Super Saiyan God, Super Saiyan, Goku, is a very interesting character to sort of break down in terms of like this design narrative. This is sort of almost a return to basics for Goku and an evolutionary step. This is a Goku who is stronger than that Super Saiyan form, but he's not trying to flaunt it, really. He's sort of trying to harness it and focus it, which I kind of think ties into like the Dragon Ball Super manga narrative a little bit, though I can't remember if Dragon Ball FighterZ came out before that plot point of the manga came up. I think it came out after, so it's sort of a moot point, right? But still interesting that you can kind of draw that line to it, I think. For starters, he reworks his 2L completely. This is now a low move, kind of hinting that this is a Goku who is trying to condense his power to be more of a tricky mix-up style of character, right? He brings back the command throw, but it's completely different, whereas his base form was very much like a very rough, kind of like grab you and chuck you kind of approach. This is a martial arts master, someone who's been training and honing his physical abilities for years, and it culminates in this very Bruce Lee-inspired one-inch punch, which is super cool to see. He combines it with his instant transmission, right, to teleport on you, to set up the spacing correctly, and he even like works out the weakness where if it whiffs, he's just going to punch you, right? Like usually you're able to punish the whiff throw by mashing on it, but you have to play around this because Blueku has taken it to a whole new step, a new ingenious mastery of the technique, or a frustrating design element of the game, if you're some players. You know, we see that his normal stay the same, again, reuse assets, but there's sort of like this ability for him to control the power now, because with Bandai Namco's patching, they buffed the normals, and that caused some combo route funkiness, and they fixed it by letting you choose how far the normals go. If you press 2M and then hold back, you reduce the range of 2M, right? I'm here after 2-2Ms, but if I do 2M4, I'm here now instead. This is a Goku who's mastered like his physical ability. This also applies to 5H, where he can reduce the range. And 2H, he finally lets his 2H rip like this. But then he's also able to make it just go directly up as well, giving him some utility. This is a Goku who has mastered his body, and he has complete control over how he wants to use it, right? For the player, it makes it a little more difficult at times, because it's an input you should be aware of to get the most use out of the character, right? But, you know, for Goku's narrative that I am writing and inventing here as we speak, it's sort of like a cool little bit of a nod to it. We also see that he kind of changes a principle of his movement, where before, right, with any of his ki blasts, he sort of stalls in air, right? But now, he doesn't. He sort of lets the momentum keep going with himself. This is a Goku who's all about speed and being on the move dynamically, not leaving himself open, right? He trades out the Tatsus for this dive kick ability, right? And, you know, again, incorporating into transmission. And on block, right, he's able to control himself, create a mix-up scenario, right? Package an assist in there. It gets really ugly. If he hits you, though, you know, he's able to recognize and go, I got you, right? And he brings back the shoulder from his base form as well, But this time he kind of reworks it. Instead of it being like this sort of tricky counterpunch move, first off, again, it's got more range with all regards. And even then, he's starting to use instant transmission to come at you from another side, right? This is Goku all about speed and overwhelming you with like the options that he's presenting, right? This is sort of like the original design philosophy, I think, for Mark System Works. Though I don't think... Did the EX cross up before? I don't think the EX crossed up before, but maybe it did. It's been so long, I can't remember how this move originally behaved. And with the shoulder tackle, he's used to fighting people who are like, you know, ki blast throwing monsters, right? Before he was fighting like, you know, very grounded hand-to-hand combat, but now he's fighting people who are throwing out like city-destroying laser blasts. And so he cloaks himself in this godly ki to deal with them, right? To go through those ki blasts. Not through beams, those are still a little too powerful for him, but, you know, for now, he's starting to kind of fine-tune his fight style for that. And of course, he incorporates the instant transmission raw to left-right you, right? Adding onto the mental stack. His auto combo is the most unique it's ever been. Instead of like this overwhelming attack sequence, he brings in like this high-low mix-up game to it, right? This is a Goku who he's used to fighting people at his level, and he's trying to like contain his power to just be all about hitting the single solitary opponents that he is now accustomed to fighting at this point in his life. Funnily enough, he doesn't use the Kamehameha as a special move in this form. Instead, it's completely relegated to a super move. And again, more interestingly so, is that, again, going back into the whole narrative of him going back to his basics, right? Revisiting old techniques from his base form days and using his new experience and his new powers now, he reincorporates the Kaioken in his super move, right? His level 3. And again, this ties into the Dragon Ball Super anime, as that never happens in the manga. Very fun fact. So this is a lot of Goku. And again, we see this element of controlling his normals. He's got a whole new normal again, but he's able to control this one as well. So many of his normals, you could control what they do, right? How far they go. And his 5M was the first one to really have this property where they gave him a 4M that's like -2 on block as opposed to being unsafe for a medium safe stagger option, right? In terms of like the game design balance. But again, it sort of ties and foreshadow neatly what Bandai would do to the rest of his kit. And again, kind of creates a story where this is a Goku who is using his new powers to master his body. And that all culminates, of course, in Ultra Instinct. Ultra Instinct Goku is a radical departure from all of Goku's previous fighting styles. And it's, you know, again, emblematic here of the stance that he takes. This isn't his normal stance that he has. This is him just standing fully tall, mostly relaxed, right? You know, you can tell his body's sort of ready to move, but he's not really, like, tense, keeping to, like, any sort of preconceived notion of a form. He's just being in the moment, as it were. And all of his normals are completely different, right? Like, he's got this huge 5L. This whole body of his is very much not about being conservative, right? This is taking his philosophy of maximizing his range to some degree, right? It's funny that this normal, like, has some pretty stubby, this form has some pretty stubby normals compared to the other ones, right? But it's all about reinventing these techniques and letting his body move on its own. His jump normals are finally reworked, right? Again, generating as much power and force as they can. He completely disregards using Ki Blast, except for this anti-Ki Blast technique right here, where, again, he kind of covers things on multiple sides. Instead, he goes into this 5S and this 2S, bringing back the anti-air that he had as a Super Saiyan, right? There's a lot of sort of revisions and revisits to things that Goku used to use across all of his forms, right? Like, again, with Bandai buffing Super Saiyan form, UI Goku now has the plus frames of that Super Saiyan 4 reinvigorated here. But it's all connected to this elaborate sequence where this is a Goku who is, again, following up on that philosophy of trying to overwhelm you with options and make you keep guessing what he's doing. From the flip, he's able to use this throw on you. He brings the Kamehameha back, right? It almost feels like Goku Blue is sort of Goku experimenting with his godly ki, and he's trying to concentrate it within himself and be more conservative with it. And then UI Goku is understanding exactly how he can unleash it. He does the Kamehameha in a completely new way where he flips at you, right? He's able to flip back at you as well with this motion. Brings it back in the air. And again, he's able to use this new flip technique. He brings back the 4-frame reversal option, but he's able to act out of it if you're a good player, unlike me, who, there we go, is missing that window. It's very particular timing you have to hit. There we go. But also, you can do into this and then go into any of his other options. This is Goku complete control of his body and what he's doing out of it. And he has taken the philosophy of like his Super Saiyan Blue form where I'm trying to deal with Ki Blast, right? And he takes it to an immense extreme where instead of resisting and deflecting the Ki Blast, he just ignores them. He just goes right through them. And not only that, he's finally cracked the code on how to deal with proper Kamehamehas, right? By, you know, just having this ability to go through projectiles like that. This is a Goku who isn't resisting his opponent's opposition. He's ignoring it through his movements. It's a very unique counter style of Goku, which he's always had some counter elements to him, right? We've seen this with his shoulder. We see it with his Super Saiyan Blue trying to deal with Ki Blast, and we saw it with anti-airing as Super Saiyan, but now it sort of all culminates into this form here. When he first was released, he did have a proper DP with his huge release of energy, very contained, going upwards, right? It's sort of a safe one to use, but it's just been nerfed to an anti-air now, so it's kind of just garbage in terms of the gameplay, but still something unique and interesting to the character, I would say. It's also interesting how this form takes a few nods from Jiren. The 5S is very reminiscent to Jiren's 5S, as well as Jiren's core circle forward, light, medium, or heavy moves. Goku does it in air, but he sort of adds, like, again, like this sort of like flurry of attacks. This is a Goku who's maximized the I gotta be the fastest guy in the universe, unlike U-Birder philosophy that he sort of picked up, that he started to really implement as a Super Saiyan Blue. Moving so fast, you can't even see him hit you, right? So this is Goku who is all about speed, but he's finally able to concentrate force and power into it because he's letting his body move instinctively with it. So there's tons of cool things about this form. It signifies a very radical departure for Goku, but there's also a Goku who is radically different from the young Saiyan who believed himself to be an Earthling that we started out with, right? So lot of sort of really cool things to interpret there. And, of course, everything gets a little more efficient. He's able to do a counter super now, just completely has access to that. If you do hit him and he recovers, he does have access to like a DP-like reversal, completely meterless. You know, he's just able to go, nah, I'm going to let it go and I'm going to hit you, right? I'm just doing this now. I'm just coming at you with all this force, and I'm making you think about all of my options, right? Because he's been under pressure. He's been under the foothill of a lot of fighters before, and he's seen how other people deal with it, and he's been able to incorporate all those into his fighting style, right? And again, using his fast speed to, if he counters you here, he just kind of floats right behind you, right? Like so fast you don't even see it. It's not even into transmission. It's just him moving, which I think is really cool. And of course, you know, it's a form where he has tons of power to display. He's got a level 2, bringing that back from his Super Saiyan form again. And his level 3, which is stunning and gorgeous. I just want to shout this animation. So, a lot of really cool things going on with like the whole design of Goku within the series here. So, anyways, that basically concludes everything I really wanted to say about Goku in this video. If I want to talk about some other things, we'd be here for another 10 minutes, but I feel like hitting the 30-minute mark is just enough for most people. So that's sort of really the whole narrative that I can sort of see from how Arc System Works has designed these characters, and then how Bandai Namco has taken those designs and added their own twists to them over the years through their balance changes and whatnot. Let me know if you found this video interesting. I genuinely enjoy talking about things like this. I've been a Dragon Ball fan for a long time now, and it's something it's a series that means a lot to me and has inspired me and has led me to this point of my life where I'm a part of an awesome community that is the FGC. So thank you all very much for watching this video. I hope to get some more content out for you soon. If you want to see me talk about Vegeta, let me know, because I will pair him up with a couple other characters that sort of tie back into this video. So take care, friends.